A copy of the Waterdeep Wazoo flitters through the air on a warm summer evening. A man in a crumpled suit pauses from his stroll and catches it in mid-flight. Emblazoned on the front of the tabloid is a moving picture of Lyriel Silverhand, the Lady Mage of Waterdeep, standing with Volothamp Gedarm, who is proudly displaying a lovely figurine of a small bird. A mischievous smile breaks wide across the face of the man as he reads the headline, Gold Canary figurine of wondrous power to be put on special display at Peregrina's Palace. Smash cut to the title Lupin III, Waterdeep and the Golden Canary. Ba-na-da-na-da-na, ba-na-da-na-da-na. Lupin III has to rank as one of my all-time top 3 favorite anime. Lupin just works. He's timeless. His crew is timeless. And through each iteration, no matter what decade, this gentleman thief wins the hearts and imaginations of his audience. Premiering as a manga in 1967 and then as an anime in 1969, Lupin III is anime royalty. In addition to the manga, the franchise includes 2 pilot animated films, 6 television series, 11 animated films, one of which being The Castle of Cagliostro, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, and which was an early storytelling inspiration for the first generation of Pixar directors. 2 live-action adaptations, 5 OVA, and 27 animated TV specials, along with 2 musicals, video games, and a massive music library. How's that for a resume? So in this series of YouTube videos, in the spirit of Lupin, we're going to do something crazy. So crazy it might just work. In fact, I think it worked a lot better than I thought it would. We're going to create the cast of Lupin as if their next great adventure was set in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. To begin with, there was no way I was going to do this without including Inspector Koichi Zenigata, based on the famous Japanese crime fighter Heiji Zenigata and the cultural counterpart to Arsène Lupin's rival Inspector Ganimard. He is one of the all-time great foils. Zenigata is 1 part Javert, 1 part Inspector Clouseau. Zenigata is a textbook example of lawful good. As far as personality goes, he is a little tough to pin down depending on which iteration of Lupin we consider. At times he is bumbling and cartoonish, while at others he is focused, calculating, and self-assured. I would argue that he has 2 core ideals, one spoken and one unspoken. First is obviously that the world would be a better place if Lupin was in jail. Second, a more subtle ideal is that when faced with a greater evil, he is willing to let lesser evils slide. This is evidenced by the amount of times Zenigata has teamed up with Lupin, albeit begrudgingly, to defeat a larger or more immediate foe. When I first started thinking about what class Pops might be, I was sure the answer was some sort of paladin. He pursues Lupin with such a dogged tenacity and unwavering commitment that it almost felt like he was maybe an Oath of Conquest paladin. But it would be next to impossible to argue that charisma is Zenigata's primary stat, and Conquest has a darkness to it that just doesn't fit Pops quite right. Instead, the more and more I looked at it, the more I realized that the subclass that fits Zenigata like a wide-brim fedora is the Order Domain Cleric. With an expanded spell list with access to spells like Command, Heroism, Zone of Truth, Hold Person, Slow, Compulsion, and Dominate Person, among other things. This subclass really feels like it could fit someone wanting to play a fantasy police inspector. Right at level 1, Pops would get the Voice of Authority. This means that he can invoke the power of law to embolden an ally to attack. This means that he can invoke the power of law to embolden an enemy to attack. If you cast a spell with a spell slot of first level or higher, and target an ally with the spell, that ally can use their reaction to immediately after the spell make a one weapon attack against a creature of your choice that you can see. If the spell targets more than one ally, you can choose the ally who makes the attack. And this reads a lot like Zenigata springing a trap on Lupin and then commanding his underlings to go catch the thief before he gets away once again. Now, after this first level, I'll leave it to you to decide if you want to keep going with this subclass. It has some good features to it, but none that I think speak directly to Zenigata's personality. If I were to keep going though, it would be more to get those spells that allow you to catch and control your quarry rather than the subclass features. While order is a big part of Zenigata's character, the subclass doesn't quite capture him in his entirety. It doesn't capture his unwavering fanaticism, his excessive, single-minded zeal, zealot, path of the zealot. Yes, that's right. We're going to multi-class, tap into Zenigata's frustrated rage, and become a path of the zealot barbarian. We're going to get rage, but we're going to take it up a notch with divine fury, giving us more damage to our attacks. At level 6, fanatical focus, letting us re-roll a saving throw, and at level 10, our zealous presence inspires those around us, like it has many of Zenigata's partners over the years. And lastly, at 14th level, he'll get Rage Beyond Death, which allows your barbarian to stave off death by holding on to that which fuels his rage. That's about as Inspector Zenigata a trait as I can imagine. In terms of feats or ASI, I think either are fine. I would just say the one feat that you can't take under any circumstances when it comes to Zenigata is lucky. That's just one thing he is not. I love that this multi-class gives us both sides of Zenigata's personality. We see the stoicism that he often has when doggedly hunting Lupin and his crew, but also the rage and fury when they escape. He has the wisdom to know where Lupin is going to be well before anyone else does, but the short temper to blow up at the local police force who doesn't believe Lupin could ever steal their prized MacGuffin. Next up, we have the renegade samurai Goemon Ishikawa XIII, wielder of the fabled Zantetsuken katana. Originally an adversary of Lupin's, creator Monkey Punch felt the original manga needed a character more directly rooted in Japanese culture. Like how Zenigata is the lawful counterbalance to Lupin's chaotic nature, the stoic swordsman serves to balance Lupin's often immature behavior. Still, the two quickly came to see a kindred spirit with one another, both being obsessed with a mastery of their respective crafts, and it wasn't long before Goemon was a regular addition to Lupin's crew. His personality traits are that he is stoic and introspective. His ideals are captured by his famous catchphrase, "Once again, I have cut a worthless object," which he says whenever he has sliced through something like a helicopter as if it were butter. He values one's inherent strength and capability and ties their worth to it. He is bonded to Lupin more than he is to the others, and it appears that outside of his capers with his crew, his life is devoted to the practice of martial arts and religious studies. His flaw is a weakness for women. Not necessarily in a lecherous way like Lupin, but his being susceptible to a damsel in distress. He's also a very poor liar and incapable of mastering any kind of technology. Goemon is likely the most straightforward build for D&D. Now, I'm sure most people will think the obvious choice for Goemon is the samurai. But no, for me, Goemon makes more sense as a way of the Kensei monk. When you look at it, the samurai class doesn't really speak to Goemon's characteristic. With the fighter's ability to wear armor and several proficiency and class features that utilize charisma, this take on the samurai is a little more classic Japanese cinema, with the intimidating, heavily armed samurai warriors squaring off on the battlefield. I think the way of the Kensei monk speaks more to the flavor of the unarmed sword master like Jin from Samurai Champloo or the fabled Miyamoto Musashi. By the way, if you haven't read the manga based on his life, Vagabond, that is a must read. I should also make 2 points. First, the reality is that mechanically, the way of Kensei is just a stronger class than the samurai. If you're going to go with a fighter for Goemon, I'd probably still pick Battlemaster over Samurai and just play the character like he were Goemon. Second, it should be said that the Samurai as a subclass is fairly problematic. In a growing list of fantastical subclasses, the Samurai, and yes, to a lesser degree the way of the Kensei as well, are the only classes that are rooted directly in real-world history. I don't think it's too egregious to make the connection to Wizards of Coast moving to a lineage system not long after the Black Lives Matter protests, when they realized maybe they shouldn't tie ability modifiers to racial traits. Personally, I think the Samurai is a subclass that should be phased out for similar reasons. Listen, if there was a ranger class called Cherokee Warrior, I think many of us could see the problem with that. Having a subclass that specifically fantasizes real-world historical figures and appropriates that culture into a game on an official level, like I said, is problematic. Yes, D&D has knights, but search your history books and you're not going to find a lot of real-world examples of rune or purple dragon knights. I also cannot really imagine someone taking the samurai subclass and not essentially making a caricature of it, no matter how far away from the real world source material someone tries to take it. Yes, the way of the Kensei is also very closely linked to Japanese culture, though I would argue it's a bit further removed from this argument because it's an honorary title given to those who have mastered the sword, and not an actual historic and cultural group of people. But I digress, let's get back to our build. Focusing now just on the game mechanics, subclass features like Way of the Kensei give our Goemon character way more options to replicate flavor than the samurai. Goemon, in my mind, is a character that comes out of nowhere, leaping from above into a swarm of enemies, and with a series of deft attacks, wipes away the impending danger. With the Way of the Kensei, Goemon will get access to Kensei weapons and agile parry at level 3, laying the groundwork to recreate that sensation. It only gets better from there because at level 6 he'll become one with the blade, making Kensei weapons magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. He'll also get Death Strike, allowing him to spend a key point to further empower his hits. Now is when I would start busting out his signature catchphrase on any critical hit or kill. At level 11, we should now really be feeling Goemon's mastery with the blade, as Sharpen the Blade allows us to use up to 3 key points to an attack and add those die to our attack or damage rolls. Level 17 grants us Unerring Accuracy, which allows our monk to reroll on a missed attack once per turn. There doesn't seem to be much need to multi-class with Goemon. In fact, I think his singular focus as a master of the martial arts and of the blade speak to keeping him a single-classed character. Feats could be a lot of fun for bringing more of that Goemon flavor into this build. I could see mobile or fighting initiative as being 2 really compelling options. If, by chance, your whole campaign was in fact based around Lupin-inspired character, first, that would be amazing. But I would honestly push your DM hard to allow you to take Great Weapon Master as a homebrew variant. It's already a shame that the Way of the Kensei monk is restricted from using these types of weapons, but in this case, I think it is a feat that would be absolutely something I would want and need for my Goemon-inspired monk. So this week, we've designed Goemon and Inspector Zenigata inspired characters. Next week, we'll take a look at creating 2 more characters from this iconic series. If, like me, you are a longtime fan of the show and of the manga, I hope I did justice to these 2. If you haven't watched the series, much of it can be streamed on Crunchyroll, though you may want to start with one of the show's greatest entries, the Miyazaki-directed Castle of of Cagliostro, which is available on Netflix. As always, thank you for joining us here at the Guildhall. We upload new D&D and anime-inspired videos every Friday, so make sure to hit like and subscribe to ensure that you are always a part of the adventure. We have a lot of exciting content and new projects coming your way soon. So as always, until then, safe journeys, adventurer.